You don't suffer because life is unfair. You suffer because you refuse to look at yourself honestly. That sits the lie you protect every day. You blame circumstances, people, timing, childhood, bad luck, the system, society, even destiny, but never the one constant in every failure. You, wherever your life stalled, wherever momentum died, wherever potential rotted, you were present. That's not bad news. That's responsibility. Most people want reassurance. They want someone to tell them they're doing their best, that things will work out, that it's not their fault. This audiobook is not for them. This is for the few who are tired of lying to themselves and ready to face the uncomfortable truth. You are the problem, and that is exactly why you can become the solution. Nothing here will insult you. Nothing here will motivate you. This will only strip away excuses until all that's left is reality, and reality doesn't care how you feel. Let destines begin. Chapter 1. You are the common denominator. Look at your life objectively. Not emotionally. Not defensively. Objectively. Different jobs, different plans, different people, different years, same patterns. That sits, not coincidence. That sits, you. This is where most people immediately tense up. The instinct is to explain, justify, defend. You start listing reasons. The boss was toxic. The market was bad. The timing was wrong. The people around you didn't support you. And maybe all of that is true, but it's also irrelevant. Because despite all those changes, one thing never changed. You were there every time. When something fails once, it can be bad luck. When it fails twice, it might still be circumstances. When it fails over and over again, in different environments, with different people, at different times, the probability of coincidence collapses. Patterns don't appear by accident. They appear because something consistent is producing them. That consistent thing is you. This isn't set an insult. It sets a diagnosis. You carry yourself into every situation. Your habits don't disappear when you switch jobs. Your mindset doesn't reset when you move cities. Your discipline doesn't magically improve when you meet new people. You bring the same reactions, the same avoidance patterns, the same work ethic, the same emotional responses with you. And then you're surprised when the results look familiar. Most people believe that change comes from external shifts. A better opportunity, a better environment, a better network. And those things do matter, but they only amplify what already exists. They don't fix what's broken. A new opportunity in undisciplined hands gets wasted. A supportive environment with a lazy mindset gets abused. A fresh start without self-awareness becomes a repeat performance. You don't escape yourself by starting over. You just restart the same cycle with new labels. This is why blaming feels so attractive. Blame is comforting. Blame lets you preserve your self-image. It tells you you're fine. The world is the problem. It allows you to feel wronged instead of responsible, and responsibility is heavy. Responsibility demands change. Blame is passive. Responsibility is active. When you blame, nothing is required of you except frustration. When you take responsibility, adaptation becomes mandatory. You have to examine how you think, how you act, how you react under pressure, how you manage your time, how you handle discomfort. And that level of self-examination is uncomfortable. Most people avoid it for years, sometimes their entire lives. Instead, they chase external fixes. They change jobs, but keep the same procrastination habits. They change relationships, but keep the same emotional immaturity. They change goals, but keep the same lack of consistency. Then they conclude that nothing works for them. In reality, everything works, just not with the way they operate. Here's a hard truth. Your results are not random. They are feedback. Your income reflects your value creation and discipline. Your physical condition reflects your daily choices. Your stress levels reflect your boundaries and coping skills. Your progress reflects your consistency. You may not like the feedback, but rejecting it doesn't change it. This chapter isn't asking you to hate yourself. It's asking you to stop lying to yourself. There's a difference. Self-hatred is useless. Self-honesty is powerful. If your life feels stuck, the question is not, why is this happening to me? The real question is, what am I repeatedly doing or not doing that produces this outcome? That question is dangerous because it puts the spotlight where most people don't want it, on their habits, on their excuses, on their avoidance. Most people are not victims of circumstance. They are victims of unexamined behavior. They repeat the same decisions while hoping for different outcomes. They cling to the same comfort zones while wishing for growth. They say they want change, but they resist the identity shift that change requires. And identity is everything. You don't rise or fall to the level of your goals. You default to the level of your habits. Goals are wishes, habits are reality. And habits don't change because you want them to. They change because you confront them honestly and replace them deliberately. That's why new opportunities won't save you. If anything, they expose you faster. More responsibility reveals more weakness. More freedom reveals more lack of structure. More options reveal more indecision. If you keep wasting opportunities, the problem isn't opportunity scarcity, it's internal mismanagement. This is where most people quit mentally. They hear this and think it's too harsh, too absolute, too unforgiving. But here's the part they miss. If you are the common denominator, you are also the leverage point. That's its good news. You can control the economy. You can control other people. You can control luck. But you can control how prepared you are when opportunity shows up. You can control how you respond under pressure. You can control your discipline, your consistency, your standards, your tolerance for discomfort. Once you accept that you are the recurring variable, you stop waiting for permission to change. You stop bargaining with circumstances. You stop hoping things will align on their own. You take ownership. And ownership changes everything. Not overnight, not dramatically, but permanently. This chapter isn't about guilt. It's about clarity. Clear people make better decisions. Confused people repeat mistakes. You don't need a new environment. You don't need a new identity story. You don't need another reset. You need to stop being the version of yourself that keeps producing the same outcomes and pretending it's bad luck. Until you do that, nothing else matters. Chapter 2. Comfort is your real addiction. You don't have a motivation problem. You have a comfort problem. That distinction matters because most people are trying to fix the wrong thing. They think they need more inspiration, more energy, more passion. They scroll, they watch, they listen, they consume endless motivational content, yet nothing changes. Not because the advice is wrong, but because motivation was never the issue. The real issue is that you are addicted to comfort, not in obvious ways, not luxury or pleasure all the time, in subtle, socially acceptable ways that slowly destroy your edge. Comfort disguised as rest, comfort disguised as self-care, comfort disguised as being realistic. Comfort is choosing what feels easy over what is necessary, and you choose it far more often than you're willing to admit. You choose it when you delay a task you know you should start. You choose it when you avoid a difficult conversation. You choose it when you lower your standards instead of raising your effort. You choose it when you tell yourself tomorrow will be different without changing anything today. None of these choices feel dangerous in the moment. That's why they work. Comfort never attacks you head-on. It seduces you slowly. The problem isn't that you rest. The problem is that you rest instead of acting. Rest is supposed to follow effort in your life. It often replaces it. You reward yourself before the work is done, sometimes before it even starts, and then you wonder why nothing moves. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Discomfort is the price of growth, and you keep trying to get the reward without paying the price. Every meaningful improvement, mental, physical, financial, emotional, requires sustained discomfort. Learning feels frustrating. Discipline feels restrictive. Change feels unstable. Responsibility feels heavy. There is no version of growth that feels comfortable in the beginning. So when you consistently avoid discomfort, you aren't protecting yourself. You are sabotaging yourself. Your brain is designed to conserve energy and avoid pain. That instinct kept humans alive. But survival instincts are not success strategies. If you let your brain lead without resistance, it will always choose the path of least effort, not the path of highest return. That's why you rationalize. I had a long day. I deserve a break. I shall do it when I feel better. I am just not in the right headspace. These statements aren't lies in isolation. They become lies when they are repeated daily, when they become your default response to challenge. At some point, exhaustion becomes an excuse, not because you're not tired, but because you're using tiredness to avoid effort rather than manage it. People who grow don't have more energy than you. They simply don't allow comfort to make their decisions. They act tired. They act unsure. They act afraid. You wait until those feelings disappear. That's the difference. Comfort also makes you fragile. The more you avoid discomfort, the lower your tolerance becomes. Tasks that once felt manageable start to feel overwhelming. Small obstacles feel like personal attacks. Any resistance feels like a reason to stop. That's why life starts to feel heavier the more you chase ease. Discomfort builds capacity. Comfort shrinks it. You can see this clearly in the body. A body that avoids physical stress becomes weak. A body exposed to controlled stress becomes strong. The same principle applies mentally and emotionally. Avoidance doesn't protect you. It makes you brittle. Most people don't fail because life is too hard. They fail because they've trained themselves to expect ease. And life doesn't care what you expect. There's another layer to this addiction that's harder to admit. Comfort protects your ego. If you don't fully try, you don't have to fully fail. If you stay half committed, you can always tell yourself that you could have done better if you really wanted to. Comfort gives you plausible deniability. You can blame circumstances because you never truly tested yourself. You can maintain the fantasy of potential without risking the reality of effort. That's why comfort feels safe. It shields you from judgment, especially your own. But potential that never turns into action is just another form of self-deception. You say you want change, but your daily behavior votes against it. Every time you choose what feels good now over what builds something later, you reinforce the identity of someone who avoids pressure. And identity, once reinforced, becomes automatic. This is why breaking the comfort cycle feels so violent at first. You are not just changing habits. You are threatening an identity you've been protecting for years. The solution is not to eliminate comfort completely. That's unrealistic. The solution is to reverse the hierarchy. Discomfort must come first. Comfort must be earned. Work before rest. Action before escape. Responsibility before relief. Not occasionally. Consistently. You don't wait to feel disciplined. You act disciplined until it becomes familiar. You don't remove fear. You move with fear present. You don't negotiate with discomfort. You expect it. Once you do that, something strange happens. Discomfort loses its power. It stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a signal that you are exactly where growth happens. This chapter isn't asking you to become extreme. It's asking you to become honest. Look at your day. Look at where you choose ease over effort. Look at how often you delay instead of decide. Look at how quickly you reach for distraction when things get difficult. That sits where your progress leaks out. You don't need more motivation. You need less tolerance for comfort at the expense of your future. Until you confront that addiction, every plan you make will collapse under pressure. Chapter 3. You lie to yourself daily. You probably think of yourself as an honest person. You don't steal. You don't cheat. You don't deliberately deceive others. And that's exactly why the most dangerous lies in your life go unnoticed. Because they aren't told to other people. They're told to yourself. Every day. Not dramatic lies. Not outrageous ones. Small, reasonable, socially acceptable lies. The kind that sound intelligent. The kind that protect your ego while quietly sabotaging your future. I still do it later. I step not ready yet. I work better under pressure. I just need more time. This isn't the right moment. Each of these statements feels harmless in isolation. None of them trigger alarm bells. That's why they work so well. But repeated daily, they form a system of self-deception that keeps you functional but ineffective. Busy but stagnant. Tired without progress. You don't lie because you're malicious. You lie because the truth demands action, and action threatens comfort. The human mind is excellent at rationalization. It doesn't need facts. It needs excuses that feel plausible, and you provide them effortlessly. When you avoid starting something difficult, your mind doesn't say, "I'm scared." It says, "I'll do it when I'm more prepared." When you quit too early, it doesn't say, "I'm undisciplined." It says, "This wasn't aligned with me anyway." These lies are convincing because they are partially true. You might actually be tired. You might genuinely lack information. Timing might really be imperfect. But the lie isn't in the condition. It's in the conclusion. You treat imperfection as a stop sign instead of what it really is, the default state of life. There will never be a moment when everything aligns. Waiting for that moment is how people waste years. Self-deception doesn't show up as dishonesty. It shows up as delay. Delay is the most common form of lying to yourself. It allows you to feel responsible without actually being responsible. You intend to change. You plan to act. You imagine progress, but intention without execution is just another story you tell yourself to feel better. And stories are powerful. You tell yourself you're in the process. You tell yourself you sit figuring things out. You tell yourself you sit sure, not like everyone else. Meanwhile, time keeps moving. Opportunities don't wait. Life doesn't pause while you negotiate with your excuses. Another lie you tell yourself is that awareness equals progress. You consume content. You understand concepts. You can explain what discipline is, what consistency is, what focus is. That knowledge gives you the illusion of growth. But understanding something intellectually doesn't mean you're applying it behaviorally. You don't get credit for knowing. You get results for doing. Self-awareness without action becomes another hiding place. You analyze instead of execute. You reflect instead of commit. You stay in your head. because it feels safer than risking failure in the real world. And then there sits the lie of identity. You say things like, "I'm just not that type of person," or "I've always been like this," or "That's not really me." These statements feel like self-knowledge, but they're actually self-imposed limits. They freeze you in a version of yourself that conveniently excuses effort. Identity is not discovered. It sits constructed. When you label yourself as someone who struggles with discipline, procrastinates, lacks confidence, or avoids confrontation, you stop seeing those traits as behaviors and start seeing them as facts. And facts, in your mind, are not negotiable. But behaviors are negotiable. They can be changed. Identities feel permanent. That's why the mind prefers identity-based excuses. Another daily lie is pretending that small choices don't matter. You tell yourself skipping one day won't hurt, that one compromise won't change anything, that one exception is harmless. And you're right once, but you don't do it once. You do it repeatedly. And repetition turns exceptions into habits. Your life is not shaped by your big decisions. It's shaped by the small ones you make automatically, the ones you don't think about, the ones you justify without resistance. You don't wake up one day and become undisciplined. You practice it. The most dangerous lie of all is telling yourself that you still have time. You assume there will be another chance, another season, another window. You act as if time is generous. It isn't. Time is indifferent. It doesn't rush you, but it doesn't wait either. Every delay costs something, even if you don't feel it immediately. Years don't disappear loudly. They vanish quietly, disguised as routines. The reason this chapter matters is because nothing changes until the lying stops. Not motivation, not strategy, not opportunity. You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge. Honesty with yourself doesn't mean self-attack. It means precision. It means calling things what they are. Procrastination, not timing. Fear, not preparation. Laziness, not burnout. Avoidance, not self-care. Once you name the behavior correctly, you gain power over it. Before that, you're negotiating with illusions. Most people never stop lying to themselves because the truth feels too threatening. It forces a decision. Either change or admit you won't, and that sips the point. As long as you lie, you can pretend you're on the way. When you tell the truth, you must either move forward or accept that you're choosing to stay where you are. Self-deception keeps you comfortable. Self-honesty makes you dangerous, and nothing meaningful changes without it. Chapter 4. Discipline is not a feeling. One of the biggest lies you've been taught is that action follows emotion, that you need to feel motivated before you act, that you need confidence before you start, that you need clarity before you commit. This belief quietly destroys progress. You wait to feel ready, and readiness never comes. You wait for motivation, and motivation fades. You wait for confidence, and confidence never shows up without action. Then you conclude that something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Your framework is wrong. Discipline is not an emotion. It's not a mood. It's not something you summon when you feel inspired. Discipline is a decision to act regardless of how you feel. It functions independently of motivation. If discipline depended on feelings, no one would ever become consistent. Feelings are unstable by nature. They change with sleep, stress, weather, feedback, and mood. Building a life on feelings is like building on sand. Yet that's exactly what most people do. They act when they feel good. They stop when they feel tired. They push when they feel inspired. They retreat when doubt shows up. As a result, Their progress is erratic and fragile. It collapses the moment conditions aren't perfect. People who are disciplined don't feel better than you. They simply don't ask their emotions for permission. They understand something you haven't fully accepted yet. Feelings are information, not instructions. Feeling unmotivated doesn't it mean stop. Feeling afraid doesn't it mean retreat. Feeling uncertain doesn't mean wait. It means proceed carefully, but proceed anyway. The problem with waiting for the right mindset is that mindset is often a consequence of action, not a prerequisite. Clarity comes from movement. Confidence comes from repetition. Motivation comes from momentum. You don't think your way into discipline, you behave your way into it. This is why planning feels productive, but rarely changes anything. You can plan for hours and still avoid the one thing that matters: execution. Planning feels safe because it doesn't require exposure. Action does. Discipline removes negotiation from your life. When you rely on feelings, every task becomes a debate. You wake up and ask yourself how you feel. You check your mood. You weigh your energy. You consider alternatives. By the time you decide, the moment has passed. Disciplined people don't debate. They decide once and follow through repeatedly. They create rules for themselves so they don't have to rely on willpower. Rules like, when it sits time, I start. When it sits hard, I continue. When I fail, I resume. No drama, no self-judgment, no emotional spirals. You don't lack discipline because you're weak. You lack discipline because you keep treating action as optional. As long as action is optional, emotions will always win. Another misunderstanding is thinking discipline is about intensity. It's not. Intensity is emotional. Discipline is structural. You don't need to feel extreme commitment. You need routines that operate whether you care or not. You need systems that run even on bad days. The goal is not to push harder, it's to make quitting harder. That's why disciplined people look boring from the outside. Their lives are repetitive, predictable, structured, and that's exactly why they progress. Freedom doesn't come from unlimited choice. It comes from removing choices that sabotage you. The more you rely on discipline, the less you rely on motivation, and the less you rely on motivation, the more stable your life becomes. There's also a misconception that discipline is restrictive, that it kills creativity, joy, or spontaneity. The opposite is true. Discipline creates freedom by reducing chaos. When your basic actions are automatic, your mental energy is freed for higher-level thinking. When your habits are stable, your emotions become more regulated. When your structure is solid, stress decreases, not increases. Lack of discipline doesn't make life free. It makes it unpredictable. Most people avoid discipline because it exposes them. When you commit to acting regardless of mood, you remove excuses. You can't blame lack of motivation anymore. If you don't act, it's because you chose not to. And that level of honesty is uncomfortable. But discomfort is the cost of self-respect. Every time you do what you said you would do, especially when you don't feel like it, you build trust with yourself. And self-trust is more important than confidence. Confidence is how you feel about your ability. Self-trust is knowing you will act regardless of how you feel. Without self-trust, goals become fantasies. With it, progress becomes inevitable. Discipline doesn't mean perfection. You will miss days. You will fail at times. That's not the issue. The issue is whether failure ends the process or becomes part of it. Undisciplined people miss once and quit. Disciplined people miss once and continue. That difference compounds. You don't need to become a different person overnight. You need to stop waiting for feelings to change Before you act, act first. Let feelings catch up later. Because if discipline were a feeling, no one would ever have it. It's a practice, a standard, a refusal to let temporary emotions dictate permanent outcomes. And once you understand that, everything changes. Chapter 5. No one is coming. This is the moment where most people mentally check out. Because this truth removes the last comforting fantasy they've been holding on to. Somewhere deep down you are still waiting. Waiting for a person, a moment, a breakthrough, a shift in circumstances that will finally make everything easier. You don't always admit it, but it shows in your behavior. You hesitate, you delay, you prepare endlessly. You tell yourself that once something external changes, you'll finally move. That belief is poison. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to knock on your door and fix your discipline, your finances, your confidence, your direction, or your future. There is no perfect mentor arriving at the right time. No sudden realization that magically removes resistance. No external permission that makes action painless. And the longer you wait for rescue, the longer your life stays on pause. This idea feels harsh because it attacks hope, but it doesn't destroy real hope. It destroys false hope, the kind that keeps you passive, the kind that replaces action with wishing. False hope sounds like optimism. In reality, it's avoidance. You tell yourself you're being patient, but you're actually postponing responsibility. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right opportunity, but you're really avoiding the risk of acting now. You convince yourself that help will come eventually, because accepting that it won't would force you to act immediately. Waiting feels safer than deciding. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they outsource responsibility for their lives. They hand it over to circumstances, to people, to timing, to fate. As long as responsibility belongs to something outside of you, you are powerless. Power begins when responsibility returns to you. The moment you accept that no one is coming, something uncomfortable happens. Excuses lose their power. You can no longer say, "If only someone showed me how," or "if only I had support," or "if only things were different." You are forced to confront the one question that matters. What am I going to do about this? That question terrifies most people, because now there's no one else to blame if nothing changes. This is why people cling to fantasies of rescue, a supportive partner, a perfect boss, a life-changing opportunity, a sudden burst of motivation. These fantasies allow you to delay action without admitting fear. But here's what those fantasies ignore. Even when help does show up, it only works for people who are already moving. Opportunities don't transform lazy people. They expose them. Guidance doesn't save undisciplined people. It overwhelms them. Support doesn't fix broken habits. It highlights them. If someone handed you exactly what you want right now, you would likely lose it, because you haven't built the structure to sustain it. That's why waiting is so dangerous. It creates the illusion of preparation without the reality of growth. Accepting that no one is coming is not about isolation. It's about ownership. It's about realizing that help can assist, but it cannot replace effort. Mentors can guide, but they cannot act for you. Systems can support, but they cannot carry you. Your life moves only when you move. This realization feels lonely at first. That's normal. When you drop the expectation of rescue, you experience a kind of emotional free fall. There's no safety net, no backup plan, no comforting story, just you and your choices. But that loneliness is temporary. What replaces it is something far more powerful: agency. When you stop waiting, you start deciding. When you stop hoping, you start building. When you stop asking who will save you, You ask what must be done, and that question changes everything. You begin to see time differently. You stop assuming there will be a better moment later. You understand that later is a story people tell themselves to avoid acting now. You stop treating today as disposable, because if no one is coming, then every day matters. This doesn't mean you never accept help. It means you don't depend on it. It means your progress is not conditional on someone else's presence, approval, or involvement. You act whether anyone notices or not. That independence is threatening to others and to your former self. People are comfortable with potential. They get uncomfortable when you start executing without asking. And that's another reason people wait. Acting without permission feels rebellious. It feels risky. Waiting feels polite. But politeness won't save you from regret. Most people reach the later stages of their lives, not wishing they had more help, but wishing they had taken responsibility sooner. They don't regret moving too early. They regret waiting too long. This chapter is not telling you that the world is cruel. It's telling you that the world is neutral. It doesn't reward intention. It rewards action. It doesn't punish waiting. It simply ignores it. No one is coming, and that is not a sentence. It's a challenge. A challenge to stop living as if your life hasn't started yet. A challenge to stop acting like the main chapter is somewhere in the future. A challenge to stop treating responsibility as a burden instead of what it truly is: control. The moment you accept that no one is coming, you stop asking for permission to begin. And that's when real progress finally starts. Chapter 7. Pain is not your enemy. You've been trained to treat pain as a problem. Something to avoid. Something to numb. Something to escape as quickly as possible. From a young age, you learned that discomfort means something is wrong. That struggle is a sign you should stop. That difficulty is a warning, not a requirement. That belief quietly sabotaged you. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is feedback. It tells you where you are weak, where you are untrained, where you are undisciplined, where reality is pushing back against who you currently are. When you avoid pain, you don't eliminate the problem. You postpone it. Unpostponed. Pain doesn't disappear. It accumulates. Most people don't suffer because they experience pain. They suffer because they refuse to face it when it's small. They avoid it early and then are forced to endure it later at a much higher cost. There are two kinds of pain in life: the pain of effort and the pain of regret, the pain of discipline and the pain of stagnation, the pain of confronting yourself and the pain of living with what you didn't become. You don't get to choose whether you experience pain. You only get to choose when and which kind. The pain you avoid today returns tomorrow with interest. When you avoid hard conversations, relationships rot. When you avoid difficult work, opportunities vanish. When you avoid physical discomfort, your body decays. When you avoid emotional honesty, resentment builds. Avoidance feels like relief in the moment, but it's actually debt. And debt always demands payment. You've probably told yourself that you're trying to protect your peace, that you don't want stress, that you don't want negativity. What you're really doing is protecting your comfort at the expense of your growth. Peace without strength is fragile. The smallest disruption shatters it. Strength comes from exposure. A muscle doesn't grow because it's protected. It grows because it's stressed, damaged, and forced to adapt. The mind works the same way. Confidence isn't built by feeling safe all the time. It's built by surviving discomfort repeatedly and realizing you didn't break. Pain teaches you what comfort never will. It shows you your limits. It reveals your excuses. It exposes your weak points. That's why most people numb themselves instead of learning. They distract, they scroll, they consume, they stay busy. Anything to avoid sitting with discomfort long enough to hear what it's trying to say. But pain ignored becomes pain amplified. Unprocessed pain turns into anxiety. Avoided pain turns into fear. Suppressed pain turns into anger. Then people wonder why they feel stuck, restless, or frustrated without knowing why. The reason is simple. They never allowed pain to do its job. Pain is a signal, not a sentence. It doesn't mean stop. It means adjust, strengthen, refine. It tells you where the work is. When something feels hard, that's not a reason to quit. That's evidence you've reached the edge of your current capacity. Growth happens at that edge, not inside your comfort zone. But here's the part most people don't understand. Pain doesn't feel meaningful while you're inside it. It only makes sense in hindsight. In the moment it feels pointless, unfair, excessive. That's why relying on emotions to guide you fails. Pain rarely feels noble while it's happening. That's why disciplined people don't ask, "Does this feel good?" They ask, "Is this necessary?" Pain also strips away illusions. When you're uncomfortable, you can't pretend as easily. You can't maintain fake confidence. You can't hide behind stories. Pain forces honesty. It shows you what you're actually capable of, not what you imagine yourself to be. This is why people who avoid pain often live in fantasy. They have plans, ideas, identities, but no proof. People who endure pain live in reality. They know exactly where they stand because pain has tested them. There's another uncomfortable truth. Some pain is self-inflicted. Not because you deserve it, but because you delayed dealing with reality. The pain of being unprepared. The pain of missed chances. The pain of knowing you could have done more. That pain is far heavier than the pain of effort. Effort hurts, but it builds pride. Regret hurts, and it builds nothing. When you choose discomfort now, you gain control later. When you avoid it now, you surrender control to circumstances. Life doesn't reward those who avoid pain. It rewards those who can withstand it without collapsing. This chapter isn't telling you to seek suffering for its own sake. It's telling you to stop running from it. To stop treating discomfort as a sign of failure. To stop numbing yourself the moment things get hard. Pain is part of the process, not a detour, not a punishment. If you feel resistance, you're not broken. You're early in the process. If you feel strain, you're adapting. If you feel pressure, you're being shaped. The question is not whether it hurts. The question is whether you're willing to let it teach you, or whether you'll retreat back into comfort and repeat the same cycle again. Pain is not your enemy. It's the cost of becoming someone stronger than who you are right now. Chapter 8. Consistency beats intensity. You keep trying to change your life in bursts. A surge of motivation, a sudden decision, a dramatic promise to yourself. For a few days, maybe a few weeks, you're different, focused, driven, serious. And then life applies pressure, emotions shift, motivation fades, and everything collapses back to where it was. This cycle isn't desperate luck. It's design. Intensity feels powerful, but it's unstable. It relies on emotion, excitement, urgency, and emotions are unreliable. They spike quickly and disappear just as fast. That's why intensity creates movement, but rarely creates transformation. Consistency is boring. That's why it works. Consistency doesn't feel impressive. It doesn't give you adrenaline. It doesn't make you feel heroic. It feels repetitive, mundane, unremarkable. And that's exactly why most people abandon it. Their ego wants progress to feel dramatic, but progress doesn't care about drama. Real change happens quietly, without witnesses, without emotional highs. It's built through small actions done repeatedly, even when they feel pointless. Especially when they feel pointless. Most people underestimate how powerful small, consistent actions are, because the results are delayed. Nothing happens immediately. No instant payoff. No visible reward. And because modern life trains you to expect instant feedback, you assume nothing is happening. You cert wrong. Consistency compounds invisibly before it compounds visibly. Just like debt, just like interest, just like decay. The early stages don't look impressive, but they are decisive. What you do repeatedly shapes who you become, whether you notice it or not. This is why people who chase intensity often feel exhausted without results. They burn energy in spikes instead of building momentum. They sprint, stop, recover, repeat, never realizing that progress rewards endurance, not explosions. Consistency doesn't ask how you feel. It asks what you do, again and again. You don't need massive effort. You need sustained effort. Effort you can repeat on bad days, not just good ones. Effort that survives boredom, frustration, doubt, and fatigue. That sits where most people fail. They quit not because it's too hard, but because it's too slow. They confuse lack of excitement with lack of progress. They mistake boredom for failure. They abandon the process because it doesn't feed their ego. And then they go searching for another intense reset, repeating the same mistake in a different form. Consistency requires humility. It forces you to accept that you won't feel special while improving, that no one will notice at first, that your progress will be invisible to others, and sometimes even to yourself. That's uncomfortable for people who need validation to stay committed. But consistency doesn't need validation. It needs repetition. There's another reason consistency is so powerful. It changes identity. Intensity changes behavior temporarily. Consistency changes who you are. When you act consistently, even in small ways, your brain starts updating your self-image. You stop seeing discipline as something you attempt and start seeing it as something you do. You stop identifying as someone who tries and start identifying as someone who follows through. That identity shift is permanent. Once your identity changes, effort decreases. What once required willpower becomes automatic. What once felt forced starts to feel normal. That's how real transformation sticks, by becoming familiar. Consistency also protects you from emotional swings. When your actions are routine, your mood matters less. You don't need to feel confident to act. You don't need to feel motivated to show up. You just execute, because that's what you do. This is what people misunderstand about disciplined individuals. They think discipline means constant struggle. It doesn't. It means reduced struggle, because decisions have already been made. Consistency removes negotiation. No daily debate, no emotional bargaining, no constant restarting, just continuation. Most people fail not because they don't start, but because they keep restarting. Restarting feels productive. It gives the illusion of change, but every restart resets momentum. Progress doesn't come from starting. It comes from not stopping. Even when you miss a day, even when you perform poorly, even when the results disappoint you, you continue. That sits the real test. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means persistence. It means refusing to let a bad day become a reason to quit. It means understanding that setbacks are part of the process, not proof that the process doesn't work. People who succeed don't avoid failure. They absorb it and keep moving. This chapter isn't asking you to become extreme. It's asking you to become reliable to yourself. If you want to change your life, stop asking how hard you can push for a short time. Ask how long you can sustain a reasonable effort. Then commit to that without drama. Consistency is unglamorous. Consistency is quiet. Consistency is underestimated. And that's why it separates those who change from those who talk about changing. Intensity impresses for a moment. Consistency transforms forever. Choose accordingly. Chapter 9. Stop identifying with your weakness. At some point, your weakness stopped being a problem and became an identity. That's when it turned dangerous. You no longer say, "I procrastinate sometimes." You say, "I stim a procrastinator." You no longer say, "I struggle with discipline." You say, "I expect, just not disciplined." You no longer say, "I stum learning to be confident." You say, "I stum not confident." Those statements feel honest. They feel self-aware. In reality, they are quiet surrender. The moment you turn a behavior into an identity, you stop trying to change it. Behaviors can be corrected. Identities feel permanent, and the mind will always defend what it believes to be permanent. You protect your weaknesses because you've woven them into who you think you are. This didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, through repetition. You failed at something, then failed again, then started expecting failure. Eventually, expectation hardened into belief. Belief hardened into identity. Now, every time an opportunity appears, that identity whispers, "This isn't set for us." And you listen. People don't realize how powerful identity is. It doesn't just influence actions, it filters reality. You notice evidence that confirms it and ignore evidence that contradicts it. If you believe you're undisciplined, every missed task feels like proof. Every small win feels like luck or an exception. Identity turns temporary states into permanent conclusions. This is why advice doesn't work for most people. You can give them perfect strategies, clear plans, proven systems, and nothing changes. Not because the advice is bad, but because it conflicts with how they see themselves. The brain will sabotage any behavior that threatens identity. You don't rise to what you want. You sink to what you believe you are. Another way people protect weakness is by romanticizing it. They turn flaws into personality traits. They wear them like badges. "I'm just wired differently. I'm a deep thinker. I'm more creative than disciplined." These statements sound sophisticated, but they serve one purpose: avoiding accountability. You can be creative and disciplined. You can be thoughtful and decisive. You can be sensitive and consistent. But as long as you use personality as an excuse, you won't be any of those things. There sits also the lie of authenticity. You tell yourself that changing would be fake, that forcing discipline would make you someone you are not. That struggle is just being true to yourself. That's nonsense. You weren't born avoiding effort. You learned it. You weren't born undisciplined. You practiced it. Nothing about your current weaknesses is sacred. They are not your essence. They are your conditioning, and conditioning can be reversed. Here's what most people miss. Identity is not discovered. It is built through evidence. Every action you repeat votes for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. When you avoid responsibility, you reinforce avoidance. When you follow through, even once, you introduce doubt into the old identity. And doubt is powerful. The old identity doesn't collapse all at once. It cracks slowly. Each disciplined action weakens it. Each kept promise challenges it. Each moment you act despite resistance rewrites the narrative. But this only works if you stop speaking your weakness into existence. The words you use matter, not because of motivation or positivity, but because language shapes expectation. If you keep declaring what you are bad at, you give yourself permission to stay bad at it. You don't need affirmations. You need precision. Instead of, I'm bad at consistency, the truth is, I haven't practiced consistency long enough. Instead of, I lack discipline, the truth is, I avoid discomfort. Instead of, this is just who I am, the truth is, this is what I repeated. Those statements don't excuse you. They expose the lever. Another trap is nostalgia for your old self. You hold on to past versions, past failures, past identities, past mistakes, as if letting go would be dishonest. You think changing means denying your history. It doesn't. It means refusing to let history dictate your future. You are allowed to outgrow the person you used to be. You are allowed to contradict your past. You are allowed to become someone your old self wouldn't recognize. But that requires something most people avoid: acting before you feel like the new identity fits. You don't wait until you feel disciplined to act disciplined. You act disciplined until the feeling follows. Identity lags behind behavior. Always. This is why people feel like imposters when they change. They think, this isn't really me. That discomfort is not a sign you're lying. It's a sign you're early. Every identity shift feels fake at first because it hasn't accumulated enough evidence yet. The mistake is quitting during that phase and retreating back to what feels familiar. Even if familiar is miserable, weakness feels honest because it's known. Strength feels uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. This chapter is not telling you to pretend. It's telling you to stop anchoring yourself to limitations that no longer serve you. You don't owe loyalty to your worst habits. You don't owe consistency to your weaknesses. Your identity is not a prison unless you keep reinforcing it. Stop introducing yourself to yourself as someone who struggles. Start introducing yourself as someone who practices discipline, practices focus, practices responsibility. Not perfectly, consistently. The moment you stop identifying with your weakness, it loses its authority. It becomes something you work on, not something you are. And that distinction changes everything. Chapter 10. Accept it or stay stuck. Everything you heard so far leads here. Not to motivation, not to inspiration, to a decision. At this point, there is no new information that will save you. You already know what needs to change. You know where you've been lying to yourself. You know where comfort has replaced effort. You know where discipline breaks down. You know which habits are wasting your time and which excuses you lean on when things get hard. Clarity is not your problem. Commitment is. Most people believe they're stuck because life is complicated. The truth is simpler and harder to accept. They are stuck because they refuse to fully choose. They live in a constant state of half-decision. They want change, but not at the cost of discomfort. They want progress, but not at the expense of identity. They want results, but not the process that produces them. So they hover. They don't quit. They don't commit. They wait. And waiting feels safe because it avoids responsibility. As long as you haven't fully decided, you can't fully fail. You can always tell yourself you were about to start, or almost there. That story protects your ego, but it destroys your future. This chapter isn't about fixing everything at once. It's about ending that hovering state. You either accept responsibility or you stay stuck. There is no third option. Acceptance doesn't mean self-blame. It means ownership. It means acknowledging that while you didn't choose every circumstance in your life, you are choosing how you respond to them now. And those choices are shaping your trajectory, whether you like it or not. Staying stuck is also a choice. It just doesn't feel like one, because it's passive. You stay stuck when you keep negotiating with yourself. You stay stuck when you wait for certainty. You stay stuck when you expect confidence to arrive before action. You stay stuck when you tell yourself you'll decide later. Later is not a plan. It sits a delay tactic. Accepting responsibility is uncomfortable because it removes all buffers. Once you accept it, you can't hide behind circumstances anymore. You can't blame timing. You can't point to other people. You can't outsource accountability. If nothing changes after this point, you know exactly why. That awareness is heavy, but it's also clean. There's no confusion, no mental noise, no false hope, just reality. This is why people avoid full acceptance. It's easier to feel confused than to feel accountable. Confusion allows excuses. Accountability demands action. But here's the part most people don't understand. Acceptance is not pressure, it's relief. When you stop lying to yourself, mental friction disappears. You're no longer split between what you say you want and what you're willing to do. Your energy stops leaking into internal debates. You stop arguing with reality. You act or you don't stet, but you own it. That ownership creates a strange kind of calm, not comfort, not ease, clarity. You no longer need motivation because you're no longer undecided. You no longer need validation because you're no longer performing. You no longer need to protect an image because you're focused on outcomes. Accepting responsibility doesn't mean you'll succeed immediately. You will fail. You will slip. You will have days where you don't live up to your standards. The difference is that failure no longer derails you. It becomes data, not identity. Stuck people interpret failure as proof they should stop. Responsible people interpret failure as information about what to adjust. Staying stuck feels less painful in the short term, but it extracts a brutal price over time. Regret doesn't arrive suddenly. It accumulates quietly. It shows up as restlessness, as dissatisfaction, as the sense that you are living below your potential without being able to explain why. That feeling doesn't go away on its own. It only goes away when action catches up with awareness. This chapter doesn't ask you to promise anything. Promises are cheap. It asks you to decide once whether you are done lying to yourself or not. If you accept that you are the problem, you gain control. If you reject it, you preserve comfort, but lose leverage. There is no rescue coming. There is no shortcut left. There is no new explanation required. You are standing exactly where your choices have led you. From here, the direction is entirely up to you. Accept responsibility and move imperfectly, quietly, consistently. Or don't dist and stay stuck. But at least be honest about which one you're choosing. That honesty is the final line between a life that changes and one that doesn't. And now the choice is yours. You've reached the end, but nothing has ended. What you've heard doesn't disappear when this stops playing. That's the uncomfortable part. Once something is seen clearly, it can't be unseen. You can distract yourself, stay busy, return to routine, but the truth will stay in the background, waiting. You now know that your life isn't shaped by luck, timing, or other people. It's shaped by patterns, and patterns come from choices, repeated choices, the ones you make when no one is watching, the ones you justify instead of questioning. You know that comfort has cost you more than failure ever did. That discipline was never about feeling ready. That no one is coming to rescue you. That pain was never the enemy. That consistency matters more than intensity. That identity is built, not discovered. And that staying stuck is not an accident. It's a decision made through avoidance. This knowledge creates a fork in the road. You can forget it, or you can live differently. For most people, forgetting is easier. They'll return to familiar habits, familiar excuses, familiar narratives. They'll call this a phase or a mindset and move on. Life will stay manageable, but it will remain limited. A smaller group will feel unsettled, not motivated, unsettled. Something will feel off when they delay. Something will feel wrong when they choose comfort without effort. Not because they're being punished, but because they're aware now. Awareness changes the cost of inaction. From this point forward, you can't honestly say you don't know why things aren't changing. You can't pretend the problem is unclear. That doesn't mean change will be easy. It means excuses will be heavier. This is not a speech about becoming perfect. Perfection is irrelevant. Consistency is what matters. Direction is what matters. The willingness to act without drama is what matters. You don't need to rebuild your entire life tomorrow. You need to stop betraying yourself in small ways today. Keep one promise. Start one task. Sit with one uncomfortable moment instead of escaping it. Let action, not emotion, lead. That's how momentum starts. Quietly, without ceremony. You may never feel ready. That's normal. Readiness is often the last thing to arrive. Responsibility comes first. Action follows. Confidence arrives later. If you take nothing else from this, take this. Your life will not change through understanding alone. It will change through repeated, uncomfortable, ordinary actions. You are the problem. And because of that, you are the only one who can fix it. Not someday, not when conditions improve. Now, what happens next is no longer a mystery.